welcome back to another episode of the DailyFlip podcast, and welcome to Liberation Day. I am your host, Alex Smith, and whether or not you like the name, you cannot deny that there's something that makes you want to say it nice and loud. The policy behind it? No, not so much. Not a fan. I'm sure you have your opinions. Throw them down in the comment section. What do you think? We're going to obviously end today with our Daily Delight, but before we get there, tell me what you are thinking about Liberation Day. Good, bad, ugly? Is it going to strangle the U.S.? Is Trump just trying to be chaotic? Why is he doing it? Any opinions you have on it, vent down there in the comment section. And if you think it's a great thing, tell us why. Because today's story does not necessarily portray that sort of perspective. It comes from alternet.org. Headline reads, High Uncertainty, How Trump's Intentional Disruption is Creating Chaos on Wall Street. I'm going to read you the first paragraph, give you the context, and then we will dive into the discussion of what Liberation Day is going to do, what it's not going to do. Obviously, at the time of recording this, the policy has not been announced, but you will see the echoes of Liberation Day throughout the rest of Trump's term, probably, unless he peels most of them back. And for the rest of today, you are definitely going to see lots of comments about what he is going to be tariffing. So the first quote reads, In Silicon Valley, a popular slogan is move fast and break things, but Wall Street and New York stock exchanges, in contrast, favor stability and predictability, and they have little appetite for chaos. Chaos, however, has been a prominent ingredient of President Donald Trump's first 2 months back in the White House, from tariff proposals to mass layoffs to federal workers. And according to Julia Coronado, president and co-founder of Macro Policy Perspectives, an economic consulting firm, the chaos of Trump's second term is making Wall Street very nervous, end quote. So, let's do the obvious. Why is stability good? Why does Wall Street like stability? This is because if things are predictable within the government, if you have a administration that says we want to create more drilling facilities, then that is easy to see one potential barrier in that industry gone, instead of a presidency like Joe Biden, who says we're going to stop public land leasing in order to find oil. You know that is a policy. Though it is stable, it is one that does not encourage investing in that area. Whereas if you have an administration that's open to it, it obviously encourages people to invest there. So that stability, that knowing of what the policy is beneficial, even if it is not in your favor. So what I mean by that is, at least if Joe Biden has that policy there, investors know to hold off in investing there and they can put their money elsewhere. When you have a president who comes in with many different ideas, who is throwing different lingo around, whether it be 20% tariffs, whether it be reciprocal tariffs, all these different ideas that he's throwing around, he doesn't seem to stick to one or the other, then it causes instability. And in this case with Liberation Day, up until this point, there have been ideas of reciprocal, there have been ideas of the fabled 15, the 15 that he wants to go after the most, from China to Canada to Mexico, anybody else that's ripping us off, India. And then there's the idea that no, we're actually going to have a level tariff. We're going to specifically come down hard on cars. He has proposed so many ideas, and as we'll see throughout today, we'll see how everything comes down. Though there has been talk from multiple representatives of the White House that there's not going to be much leeway here. And that may have been a saving grace for some industries and some people who are participating in the market, saying, okay, hey, we know that this sector is going to get hit hard, but at least this sector is not going to be hit too much. So maybe we can start importing more of those goods to American consumers. And it seems that the White House has taken that off the table, saying we're not going to look at exceptions yet. Maybe we can negotiate them once they're in place, but we are not looking at them first off. And that leaves Wall Street very, very concerned. This is because, one, it means, okay, this comment would be highly concerning to anybody who's on Wall Street and in the lobbyist industry, saying, well, we can't even fight for exemptions. We can't even go to our clients and say, hey, give us money and we'll be able to get a change in this policy. If there are no exemptions, which is not likely to happen, Trump has made carve-outs. He did the exact same thing in his first term when he implemented tariffs. But if that is actually true and there are none, then lobbyist firms are going to be infuriated that they can't actually go to their clients asking for money to give a proper rationalization, saying we can actually fight for these, if Donald Trump is saying no, it's not going to happen at all. If certain industries and if certain countries who have prominent industries want cutouts for these different industries that they're trying to grow and they're trying to get into the U.S. domestic market, they'll be extremely frustrated. Wall Street won't know where to actually put money because these lobbyists can't affect policy. At least if you are on Wall Street and you have a few different lobbying buddies, say, hey, we're going to try to create a carve out for this, this, and this, you can say, okay, at least they'll be safe havens. They won't be necessarily affected the worst by tariffs. But if there's an overall 20% flat tariff, no exemptions yet, then at least you can say, well, okay, we know that everything's going to be hit. That is some level of safety because you can keep things in cash, but it's not enough to encourage them to continue pumping up the, I don't want to say pyramid scheme because that's not necessarily fair, but the Wall Street economic system is not a proper model that properly represents the value of companies anymore. I've talked about this multiple times before. So when you cannot continually pump in more money from investors, from people putting into 401ks, their pension plans, then you start to see massive falls in these approximate values of these different companies, and then you start to see a sentiment of fear. People want to pull out, which causes instability, or at least the appearance of instability, and this could topple things for a lot of different Wall Street brokerage firms. I'm not saying it will actually send them into the mud, but it will send them into the red for quite some time, and that is what they're sitting there worrying about. So let's actually go into what some Wall Street insiders are saying. And this is interesting. It's coming from Alternet, and Alternet is not the champion of the Wall Street elite. They are the people who would probably be more on the side of Occupy Wall Street, but they've taken this tack because they see an opening in Donald Trump's policy. Quote, the Wall Street insider stressed that Wall Street doesn't like uncertainty. Quote, when there is low confidence in markets, Cornetto told Politico, quote, you tend to see these ebbs and flows where you get some periods of volatile repricing. When the uncertainty is high, it's not like active investors are putting a lot of capital to work or making big bets. That means the market is more driven by trend followers, passive money. So you get repricing and then a period of calm, end quote. This is something where you see the dot-com boom. You see all these different investors putting money everywhere. And as things start to crash a little bit, the ones that look more steady, the ones that look as though they'll be there long term, the passive investors are going to sit with for a long time, the ones that actually have true value propositions, they get the money, gets reappropriated, everything gets repriced, some go to zero, and then you see a calm period after that. We've had a tech and AI boom over the last few years here. Now, with the new competition coming out of AI, we saw basically a sixth and then a little bit more than that, maybe even a fourth of NVIDIA's market value chopped off in the course of a week. We may see the same thing with Tesla because their prices have been going down. And if a bubble bursts, it's going to be in that sector, the Magnificent Seven, the ones that are basically leading the entire growth of the S&P 500. So this could send ripples and shockwaves through the economy. And when I say through the economy, I mean through the speculative economy of the stock exchange, not necessarily the economy itself, because the ripple effects there will be prices. Tariffs will cause these prices to go up. Suppliers will not necessarily know what they will be able to get for cheaper because they might have lots of products and lots of different materials that come from other countries, and they're going to have to do a price evaluation as to whether or not they have to buy it domestic or from those other places and eat the tariffs. You're going to see those costs pass on to consumers, and that is probably the most dangerous thing. That is probably the most dangerous form of instability coming out of Liberation Day. Not even actually instability, just a knock-on consequence of tariffs. If you are sitting there as Donald Trump and you promised to bring inflation back under control, and you are implementing a policy that will naturally lead to higher inflation because most products that we get from other countries are normally done with cheaper labor, not always, but especially when it comes to low-cost commodities, those are done with cheaper labor, meaning that we can get them at a relatively cheap price. If it has to be made here in the United States, either companies have to build up the infrastructure to actually build that manufacturing plant with robotics, which means high cost and high overhead to run those sort of things, or they have to use American labor, which is going to be more expensive because our standard of living is higher and inflation has continually pushed up it has actually shrunk the buying power of the US dollar, meaning that we've had to increase wages in order to keep pace, which means that relatively you're going to be paying more for an average American worker, $13 an hour, where you might be paying a Vietnamese worker $7 an hour. And obviously that's not necessarily fair, but think about it this way. Even if even if they're getting less money in their society, that $7 may be able to buy just as much, or at least have equivalent pricing power to the $13 here. But because things are priced in dollars, and because the U.S. workers have a higher standard of living, and because everything around them is more expensive, they're getting paid more money, which means that costs get pushed on to consumers, because in order to pay those wages, the company has to eat that extra cost. You can see how this is going to be detrimental. I've talked about the tariffs before. I've talked about why I believe they're problematic. And I have spoken multiple times about how a blanket tariff will not be good, how even targeted tariffs in certain sectors may not serve the purpose that Donald Trump wants. And now we've known that Wall Street's hesitant about this, but some of Trump's more recent statements about no holds barred, not pulling back, it is going to make today a very interesting Liberation Day. Watch the markets. The markets will respond terribly if the tariffs go in. Actually, I take that back. If any tariffs go in, they're not going to like it. They are an organization that's trying to price in the cost of everything coming from organizations, companies all around the world on the stock exchanges, not just U.S. companies, it's international companies, it's U.S. companies that deal with international companies. So there's going to be a tumble. The question is it going to be sector specific? Are there going to be ones to hit further than those? I don't know. But I'll tell you right now, people are not going to be happy when they look at their 401k value going down after tomorrow. But hey, that's enough on that one. Let's jump to our daily delight. We're going to end on a positive note. That's the whole point. We want to leave you smiling. This one comes from our friends over at Dog Time. The headline reads, "Video of dog's first international trip is a tropical vibe." And honestly, this dog looks so happy to be out of the country. He's down in the Caribbean. He's loving the water. And if you have time to watch the whole thing, great. If not, skip towards the end. They have some dubs from the owner of the dog, which are honestly hilarious, and it will leave you smiling. I absolutely promise you. And if you want to find the link to that or the first article that we had talked about from Alternate, they are both linked in the description below that like and subscribe button. If you go down there, you can also find the link to the Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, where I post these. You can download them, listen to them on your own time, or you can go follow the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post links to both these episodes that come out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, as well as the 6 in 6 episodes. So that's our international news segment, 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less, and those come out on Tuesday and Thursday. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.